I was what they called a zealot. The first Roman I met was one of the 10th Legion when they came storming through our town. I was 6 years old. They killed my father. When they'd finished with her, they killed my mother as well. I was dragged off to be a slave to some Roman nobleman and his family. And it wasn't until I was 14 I was strong enough to take one of the knives from the kitchen and slit my master's throat and run off to the hills. And that's when I became a zealot. And in those years I learned a few things. I learned about hate. I learned about pain. I learned about suffering. I learned Latin. And I learned about revenge. I didn't start as a follower of Jesus. There was another bloke who found me. Judas, his name was. Judas Iscariot. Like me, he carried a sword beneath his cloak. And he taught me a new idea. He taught me about a bloke they called the Messiah, who was going to free his people, who was going to throw off the shackles of Roman oppression and bring back the kingdom of David. So like the rest of them, I yelled, "Hosanna!" as we rode into the city. And nothing pleased me more than to see those quizzling collaborators scrabbling around on the floor trying to pick up their money when we overturned their money-changing tables and drove them out of the temple at the point of a lash. The time has come, I thought. We're really going to achieve power. It's time for the kingdom. But Jesus wasn't like that. He didn't want a kingdom like I wanted. And I was almost persuaded. When he told us we must love our enemies, do good to those who hurt you, I was almost persuaded. When I saw the effect he had on people around him, when I saw the wonders that he worked, when I saw the joy and peace he brought to troubled people, I was almost convinced. But then John came back and told us he'd been arrested in the garden. And I was mad. Why didn't you fight for him? He told us Peter tried, but the Lord said no. If you live by the sword, you will die by the sword. That didn't seem such a bad trade to me, if it brought our people freedom. And I went with the others. And I saw those hated Romans condemn him. And as I watched him being paraded through the street carrying his cross, crowned with thorns in mockery, wrapped in a purple cloak, but offering no resistance, the anger in my heart grew and seethed. And I still burned for revenge. When they took him up the hill, nailed him to the cross, and in complete indifference and spite, played at dice beneath the cross, gambling over the last few pathetic pieces of clothing that were the master's only possessions. The anger boiled and seethed within me even more. And then I heard him speak. And he said, "Forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do." But I didn't believe him. I thought they knew very well what they did, and that they deserved to die because of it. I couldn't be like Jesus. His last thoughts on the cross were not even for himself. He looked down and saw his mother. He saw his favorite disciple, broken and helpless. And he asked the one to take care of the other, and in doing so helped to heal them both. But I couldn't be as good as Jesus. I couldn't look for someone else to love. At the foot of the cross, all I could feel was hate. And I tightened the grip on the sword beneath my cloak. And I edged towards the centurion who had been responsible for this travesty. And I was determined that if I could only take one life, it would be his that day in return for the master's. And I came very close. The sword was sliding out of its sheath when I heard this Roman, this epitome of all that I hated and detested. I heard him speak. And those years that I had spent in a Roman household were of use to me for the first time ever. Because though he spoke in Latin, I understood. And he, a Roman who had crucified my master, said, "In truth, this man is the Son of God." And his words took the sword out of my hand. If the master could have this effect on one of them, how could I betray him anymore?